Hi there. I'm Patty DeDominic. I am a strategic coach for companies on the verge of very dynamic growth.
And you've got a story to share with us today. Where in the world does this story start?
Oh gosh. Well, how about when I was 28 years old and I wanted to start a business? In fact, that's exactly what I did. Um, when I was young, we had a staffing company. We competed with Kelly Services and Manpower, and it was the right place at the right time in Los Angeles in the late 70s, early 80s. For 27 years, I grew that business and it became one of the largest employers in California, as a matter of fact. By the time I sold 27 years later, we had 660 employees and we were in 33 states. That's a story. I was an entrepreneur, startup entrepreneur, and we lasted, unlike the statistics of many who don't. And I learned a lot along the way. I really did.
It looks like I froze. There we go. 27 years is quite a juicy period of time for us to dive into the details of everything that was going on. But since it is such a long period of time, there's probably, the story is replete with all kinds of things that you learned. I am curious, is there a time during that 27 years where if you were able to go back in time and visit yourself, is there a cheat code or a message or a tip or a hint that you would give yourself if you could just write it down on a little slip of paper and slip it into your pocket? How old are you at the time you're going to give yourself that advice, and what's going on in your world?
I had children. I had my third child, my third son, a year or two after I started my business. And I remember both the business and my sons grew up pretty fast. And perhaps I might have delayed starting the business, or I might have delayed growing the business in the early years when my children were young. Hindsight, I know you have your child, or do you have two or just one?
I have two. Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old and a 14-month-old.
Yeah. I mean, they just grow up so fast. So I really admire people today who can take time to spend quality parenting time with their kids, and who can separate themselves out, maybe even those who are fortunate enough to work from home. That might be a piece of advice that I would give myself, is work a little bit less. It didn't really matter if I became a millionaire at 30 or 31. Did it. That was a cool thing. And but the reality is my kids didn't really matter to my kids. And if I would have become a millionaire at 35 or 40, actually, they wouldn't even cared either. So the commercial success was something that was important to me, and I wanted to grow my business, and I did. And I found that I could change other people's lives by making career opportunities, both for the professionals that we hired and developed along the way, because you can't grow a business without developing a team, and a good, strong team to boot. And of course, being in the employment business, we learn all about recruiting and touching thousands of lives. We counted up the number of people that we placed into jobs in the last 10 years that I was in business. We placed over 250,000 people into jobs or career opportunities. So it was a big impact, and I loved that we did that. And I think it's different from today's business. A lot of times people think that they have a big impact, but maybe because they have a few thousand followers or a few 100,000 followers. But I think what's really important is which lives are you really touching, and what kind of exchange is there in terms of value, in terms of monetization, and for your own life, so that you can have a balanced life that includes abundance, but also time for yourself and time for your health.
Is there a period, I have a couple questions for you. Is there a period of time where the business really started accelerating, like the gas pedal hit and you went from 5 million to 50 million, where, you might've been hitting little tinier increments along the way? Where was the jump, and what happened? What made the difference?
Well, there was a recession in 1982, and we had just started the business a few years earlier. We weren't sure if we were going to get through the downturn in volume in those years, 82. But we made it through that. And in fact, it was kind of slow and a little bit painful, a little bit embarrassing when sales didn't come in. But what almost killed us was in 83, when the economy bounced back and sales doubled and tripled within a period of about 4 to 5 months. And so what happens when a company is growing very quickly, especially in our business, the staffing business. So we had orders, which meant we have to fund payroll every week. So we ran out of cash. That could have killed us right there. Growing too fast. That was one thing. So planning growth and planning your compounded annual growth rate is possible, and it's valuable to do, especially if you're going to grow into a multi-million-dollar company. There was another time when I invested in technology in a CRM where I had originally put aside a $25,000 budget for some technology that I wanted for a database. I hired a consultant who knew a lot more about running mega companies than me. We were at $4 million a year at that time, and by making that $120,000 investment in technology, we went from 4 million to 6 million. And that was a wonderful jump because of that. And it was something that I learned. And you don't grow exponentially by skimping your way or investing your way, pinching pennies. You've got to invest where you think you're going to have a high return on sales. And in fact, that's what I did. I had a $25,000 budget for that technology. But when my consultant went out and looked at the options and then came back to me and said, yes, you can still spend your original budget, but if you spend a little bit more, I think you can get a lot more. So in fact, we did. We were just planning on continuing our 5 to 10 to 15% annual growth. But what happened was we grew by millions of dollars that year because of that strategic investment. There was one more time, Eric. It was right after I sold the company in 2006. And the company that bought us retained me for 2 years as a consultant for some of their franchisees. So I was able to focus on what I do best, which is coaching entrepreneurs, especially people who have skin in the game. And in coaching some of their franchisees, it took me 27 years to build up to $30 million a year in sales. But in the next 6 months after selling, I helped get an additional $20 million worth of contracts. So literally 27 years to go to 30 million, and then 27 and a half years to go to 50 million in sales from my own company. And then we were part of the aggregate sales, and we went from 500 million. And then we acquired a few more companies, actually more than 10. And we grew to $1.8 billion in sales in less than 2 years. That gives you an idea of the power of focus, and that people who are on the verge of exponential growth are doing things differently than people who are slaving away at entrepreneurial survival skills.
Give me the playbook. What can everybody do right now to accelerate in such a way and really stop slaving away? Because I know a lot of people who are, and I'm curious if you can help them put down the shovel, so to speak.
I was in my 20s when I started, and I really wanted to just do something exciting and have a business. I really didn't have a clear vision of what my future was. And I didn't really have a clear vision of how quickly the years and the decades would pass. That, I think, is the most important thing. When leadership lacks clarity, the business kind of goes from one strategy to another. I admit, when I was in my early 30s, I was looking around for people who knew more than I did, who could save me or who could tell me exactly the right thing to do. And I realize now in hindsight, I was really the only one who could do that for my business. It was my skin in the game, my house that signed, personal guarantee and guaranteed any loan. So lack of clarity and where are we going? And if somebody has that, they should make sure their mission is very, very clear. What's your future? And then what are your 3 top priorities for this year? Not your to-do list of 40 things, not your one BHAG, but your to-do list, your 3 top priorities that you want to get done this year, and focus on that. The next one that I see was a problem that has slowed down is misaligned values. Sometimes we were chasing the contracts. Sometimes we were chasing the money. Sometimes we were chasing prestigious clients like We wanted to do business with Harvard University. That was pretty good. That was a worthwhile chase. We wanted to do business with Paramount Studios and Walt Disney Studios. Those were very prestigious clients too. But it just so happened that Paramount Studios was a shrewd negotiator, and they really nickeled and dimed us, and we couldn't make money on that particular contract. Disney had a bad reputation for the way that they treated their employees. They were a magnet because they were so famous. There are companies like that today. Amazon is kind of one of them. They have a reputation of being incredible and big and fast growing, but they also have a reputation of not really treating their people well. So I think that's important. We sometimes chase the dollars. We needed to align our values. And eventually we came up with the idea that we were staffing partners to America's finest employers. And that kind of gave us a reinforcement about who we were and which customers we were going after. And by the way, we didn't think that America's finest employers chiseled their vendors down so that they lost money on their contracts, or we didn't think that America's finest employers discriminated or paid minimum wage. And so those were not on our prospect list. I think that that's important. Well, what's the business model? That's another thing, because there are many different business models, and especially today, 2025, there's so many different kinds of business models, and you want to get clear about that. And you probably want to have more than one.
So I want to come back to that, but help me bridge the gap between two things that you said. Was that the mission and the vision, they have to come from you as an entrepreneur, right? And then you told me your mission. You figured out, right? Like, we're staffing the finest companies. Talk to me a little bit about the process that you actually took to come up with that, right? Like, you're out there in your 30s and you're looking for the answers. You're trying to find it. You're looking for mentors to give you the secret sauce. And you suddenly realize, like, no, this is going to come from me. Were you in front of a whiteboard? Did you have papers scattered all over? Were you at the mountain praying to Ahura Mazda? Like, how did you figure out that mission for your business? Walk me through the process.
Okay, it's not like a lightning bolt strikes when you're on a mountain and you finally get enlightenment. It's usually more like I fell down 100 times, and on the 95th time I go, oh, well, get off this trail. Duh, it's quite dangerous, right? So I think I remember we would have an annual planning retreat where we would come up with our thoughts for our business model, which customers we wanted to go after, what our selling strategies were. Our market at the time, at least for the first 15 years, was Southern California, Los Angeles County, Orange County, and such. And so we would have our annual retreat, but we would also we go through a process called SWOT analysis. Have you heard of it? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we did that for our company every year. And we also invited our managers and executives to do that for themselves and their departments. And so when you recognize a recurring problem and you say, this is not just a freak weird thing or a little bit of bad luck, this is a glitch in our system that needs to be fixed. Otherwise, it's going to explode on us, right? Blow up with us. So I think that was important. We would go on our annual retreats, and sometimes we'd say, hey, I remember one time when we were going to stop a particular contract with LA County juvenile halls. That was a tough contract to have. And there was a particular supervisor on site who was kind of predatory. He harassed female employees. And so specifically when we came up with this about we are staffing partner to America's finest employers, who are we? Are we going to continue to staff that particular supervisor, even though we know he's going to be a problem? If we send a gorgeous female there, she's going to be bothered by him. Or if we send a man, he's going to be rejected because this particular guy wants to interact with female employees. That's when we had to make a decision about that's not the business that we were in. And we had to go back to him and explain to him what the problem was, remind him that his activities were against the law. And then we also had to go back to the purchasing department, because when you're dealing with government, you're not just getting orders from the using department. You have a whole series of contracts that you have to go through. So we reported it to the purchasing department, who said, off the record, Patty, this guy is in a protected class. He's near retirement age. He's parked here to keep him out of harm's way. And we're not going to do anything about him. He's going to be gone in a year or two. So we said, we will not be rebidding that contract. We walked away from, on several occasions, on more than one occasion, $1 million worth of volume with that particular client, because we realigned and reassessed our own values and said, are we going to keep on sending poor little Christian girls to the lion's den over there? Or are we going to say we are staffing partners to America's finest employers? And are we going to walk our talk? So were every single one of our clients one of America's finest employers? No. However, they couldn't be a flagrant violator. And we grandmothered in some of our old clients, and we said if they were striving to be one of America's finest employers, we'd keep them.
You had to have some leading indicators of integrity along the way to
Exactly.
That's
And we
great.
had a similar situation where we had released our contract with Paramount Studios. We stopped soliciting business from Disney just because they were really tough to do business with, and they were not real mature about it. They were, a little. And while Paramount, we didn't have the arrogancy. I actually had a great relationship with the president of Paramount, but they were such good negotiators, and they had negotiated the terms as onerous for us and the prices to the point where we literally lost money every single time we sent someone to work at Paramount Studios. So again, That was $1 million account, but we weren't making $1 million profit. That's for sure. We were actually just barely breaking even on it.
You've transitioned your career, and you sold the company. You've moved on to coaching, and links and everybody can find you. But I'm curious about you and your operating system and your mindset. One of the questions that I ask on the show a lot is, like, when you're going through really difficult times, or when you've experienced some sort of hardship, do you have any sort of like mantras or sayings or quotes that you have posted on the wall or posted on your heart that you reflect to, that help you stay aligned and stay focused?
Yes, many. One is, this too shall pass. And during the Iraq War, President Bush declared a victory after a battle that we apparently prevailed on, but it wasn't the end. But he stood up and he made a speech, but he also made a statement: "We will not fail." And later, I bought an oil painting of George Bush with the words, "We will not fail," down. It was a patriotic thing to do. It was part of a fundraiser for something, but it was a beautiful painting. I actually still have it somewhere in my supplies, but that was important. And then there's one more. It's like really having hard times, and we all do, by the way. It's not like success. It's like fail, see the light, get excited, fail, okay, win, fail, win. That's basically what it's like, for sure. But the other is, when you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hold on.
Patty, where can everyone find you?
PattyDeDominic.com. And I do have a couple of free gifts. I've got a book, Avoiding the 13 Deadly Pitfalls on the Road to Growth, to Exponential Growth, and that everybody could avoid those pitfalls.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I loved having you. I love being with you, and I love being part of your audience, and I love being part of one of your guests. So thank you very much.
This has been the Pulse Ox Podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.